Hi everyone, and many thanks for taking time to be with us. My name is Malin Sundström, and I am a researcher within business and consumer behavior, but also within retailing. I currently work at Malmö University in Sweden. I was asked by the CEO of Holbrook, Daniel, to do a short presentation on consumer trends and new patterns during this pandemic year. So hang on. I'd just like to kick off, if I may, really, with a few slides presenting new consumer patterns. But before I do, a short notice on what we mean when we study consumer patterns. We focus on consumer modes, consumer spendings and saving, of course, consumer behavior and preferences, as well as important attitudes. My intention with this presentation is to give you a short glimpse of the changing patterns we are facing due to the pandemic and longer term implications of what we are seeing. Such insight might support you in your strategic work as well as frame the efforts of Holbrook. I'd like to start with some information about the data. All of the numbers presented come from a global survey of consumers performed by Deloitte and their consumer tracker. I have focused on the answers from consumers in the UK and the US. However, when looking at the other countries, I think it's safe to say that the differences are very, very small. This means consumers tend to show the same patterns all over the Western world. So now, starting with consumer moods. People are responding to crisis in a variety of ways, and they have different attitudes and different purchasing habits as a result of the crisis. People across the globe are afraid as they strive to adapt to a new normal. I guess you have heard that expression before. Fear is running high as people contemplate what this crisis means for them as an individual, but most important, what the crisis means to their family, to their friends, and society at all. Consumers are responding to the crisis in a variety of ways. Some feel anxious, some feel worry, and some consumers actually remain indifferent to the pandemic and they continue business as usual despite recommendations from government. But this graph is the average picture of consumer moods. As consumers have adjusted to life during the pandemic, feelings of worry, frustration, and anxiety are continuing their downward trend in the UK. This means people are getting more and more safe. Restrictions were generally being relaxed across the UK, which may have contributed to this downward trend in negative emotions felt by consumers. Consumers in the US have reported a slight increase in feelings of anxiety and worry during 2021, though it is still lower than the reported levels in December 2020, as you can see. Now, moving on to the next variable, which is spendings and savings. Respondents were asked to consider their allocation of income, both before and after the COVID-19 crisis. Across these two countries, consumers are allocating a higher proportion of their income towards savings and investment, a quite natural behavior, I think. Within the UK, consumers report to spend less on entertainment and rent. US consumers, on the other side, have decreased their spending on shopping. The next variable is consumer choices of purchasing channels. As you all know, the rise of online shopping has been tremendous during the pandemic. Even with lockdown restrictions being lifted across the US and the UK, consumers have continued to rely heavily on online purchases for clothing, groceries, and food deliveries. The August 2021 survey showed that online purchasing of clothing and food delivery are continuing to rise in both the US and UK, reversing the decrease reported in December 2020. Online grocery shopping remains stable in the UK, but has seen a decline in the US from March 2021. Another important variable when tracing new consumer patterns is attitudes towards sustainable products and sustainable production. Despite concern over inflation and increased costs of living, consumers in these two countries continue to support sustainable sourcing of products. The majority of consumers in both the UK and US are willing to pay at least 10% more for products that are sustainably produced. This is very interesting to see. It is clear that changes in attitudes towards more sustainable consumption due to the pandemic are having a serious impact and will have in the future. This is most likely due to the fact that people have begun to understand the consequences of climate change. It is therefore interesting to note that we are starting to get what we call climate activists who have strong ideas about what a good brand should stand for. This is expressed, among other things, in the fact that 7 in 10 US consumers believe that by 2030, brands will be penalized through either fines or higher taxation if they fail to reduce their environmental impact. For many brands, communicating concrete climate actions is therefore both a challenge but also a growth opportunity if you succeed. So, wrapping up this very short data presentation, many researchers believe the pandemic has shifted consumer habits and values in ways that present longer-term implications. And some of these implications are, for the first, consumers will demand or expect more from the brand. That is, in terms of environmental impact. Secondly, consumers want businesses to help them become more environmentally friendly. And thirdly, consumers will continue to shop online and most certainly shop even more online in the future. So, with these few slides, I thank you for listening to me, and I hope that you have gained some important insights about the market opportunities of the future. I want to emphasize the global crisis created by the pandemic will have long-term consequences for how people think and how people make their consumption decision in the future. The available data points in the same direction, namely that it will be even more important to have a strong brand in your collection with a clear sustainability profile. When it comes to fashion consumption in particular, it will be even more important for consumers to buy garments that last a long time, that are classic, that have good functions, and garments that can be combined in a variety of ways. Thank you.